What if the key to family wellness lies not just in individual health, but in nurturing the nervous system of the whole family? Today, we're exploring a holistic approach that brings parents and children closer while supporting everyone's mental and physical well-being.
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
Our guest today is BG Mancini, founder of the Brain and Gut Institute and creator of the Family Nervous System. BG's mission is to help families understand that healing is a connected journey, one that involves the entire living organism of the family. This compassionate approach is essential in a world where childhood chronic health issues are on the rise and parents often struggle with their own stressors and trauma. BG, welcome to the show. We're excited to get into this.
Thanks, guys. I'm really happy to be here with you.
BG, great to have you here. I'm really excited to talk about what is this family nervous system, but one breath grounding practice. And BG, join us so we can ground the show, get calm, and chill out so we can really dive into this episode. But let's just start with a nice little exhale out the mouth. Get empty, 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 even emptier if you can. And take a big giant breath in through the nose. Fill up with like a big giant balloon. Keep going. Take one more sip of air at the top. And let it go out slowly. And just melt your body a little bit deeper into this time and into this space. Open up your ears, open up your mind. And again, hey, thank you everyone for being here, for tuning in, sharing our podcast, leaving us a review would be great, helping us grow and making the world and yourself more mindful.
Let's get into this, BG. First off, I loved your notes in our calendar invite about your name actually being BG because of baby girl, and your parents just didn't feel like changing it. That's hilarious. But I love it, BG. So aside from that, some of our listeners might be thinking, just the name, the family nervous system is kind of woo woo. Can you break this down? What is the family nervous system? What's it all about?
Well, so the family nervous system came about like this. I was into my 15th year of working with clients and patients. My demographic was primarily parents between the age of 35 and 55. But I didn't really get into the children aspect of things, and I kind of just treated them as they came in. I was doing acupuncture, some functional medicine. And then over the course of about 2.5 weeks, I started asking people, hey, how are your kids? What ages, etc. And this is what I got. This is before I had kids. Oh, they're great. Pause for dramatic reflection. One has anxiety, one has depression, one throws up before school, one doesn't poop, has 3 medications, one is this, that, and the other thing. And my mind was just like, whoa, what is happening here? And so then I really started diving deep into working with children and understanding their needs and doing, even from infancy, I now get calls in NICU. I'm like, how do we augment the trauma of separation, that kind of thing. So what I learned was then I started working just with kids. And then I would see the kids start to get better. And then I found this phenomenon where parents would actually, that feeling when you're holding it all together, when that stress is over, you don't just, okay, suddenly everything's great, right? The nervous system now sort of collapses and compresses, and now you need time to recover. So a large percentage of the families I was working with, as the kids would get a little bit better, what I found is that parents, the imprint of their child's challenges, if it's neurological, physical, emotional, behavioral, they're frozen at the child's worst point because that's where the biggest impact hit us, right? So if my child is melting down every day and banging their head and not eating, whatever it is their issue is, right? Getting calls from school every day, my stress level, my trauma lands there. And then even when they start to get a little better, it's kind of like that has to be resolved for the parent. So the kids were getting better, but the parents a lot of times were now staying stuck. And the parents were actually, so if you picture, this is the image that I have drawn up, is parents under pool water, right? And they're under the pool and under the pool water, and they're holding their kids right here. So they were bringing their kids to me and I was sort of levering them up, but then the parents were still underwater. So what I found is we had to crank the whole family together to get above that pool level line to keep them together, because we don't want the kids to be up here and starting to resolve stuff and the parents down here And then parents were getting, especially the women, okay, were the moms, right? The wives were getting autoimmune issues. They were developing more anxiety. They were developing all of these physiological symptoms from the stress of having gone through that with their kids. So really it's about working together to keep the whole unit moving forward.
Yeah. And what, I mean, it's fascinating. A completely different approach to medicine, which I think you're spot on, because we are uh, definitely, just succumb to the environment that we're in, and we're us being so emotional at our core. We're obviously affected by the people we love the most. Um, so, what were some of those connections that you saw, and early on, like that really helped you kind of to develop more of this family structure of within the nervous system, and then kind of achieving health through that unity and that awareness, because it's something very, very different that I'd imagine a lot of it was overlooked by the mainstream wellness, and kind of health overall.
It is. And, you brought a good point, Wells, that this is not just being overlooked, obviously, by the traditional medical system. It's being overlooked by our, neurointegrative functional medicine community a little bit as well. So, what really sort of augmented my thinking was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Stephen Porges, his work with the polyvagal theory. It's awesome. You guys would probably love it.
Yeah, we've had Travis. What's his last name? One of
Goodman.
our Goodman. Yeah, on our show, and he's big proponent. Yeah, okay, he's big proponent. Polyvagal. So maybe dive in there a little bit, because I want to learn about that.
Yes, I was just sort of like celebrating last evening. I was told that I'm an official educational partner with them starting in March. I'll be doing a course all about this. All right.
Congratulations.
So Steve Porges says, number one, the polyvagal theory essentially gives us our autonomic states, like how we move through. He first said it was, engaged, fight, flight, and then he added freeze, which was a new component many years ago, right? And now he's sort of reframed that into engage, where we're social and open and curious and connected. And then there's the fight, flight. Then there's also immobilized, and where we're just completely down. And then there's the states in between, right? Sort of the hybrid states, which are really important. He also created a program, and that's what I was mentioning before we were chatting, the SSP program. It's called the Safe and Sound Protocol. And it's an auditory listening program that conveys cues of safety as if a regulated mother was holding their infant and sending cues of safety. So it's a vagus nerve acoustic program. And why that was so important for changing all of my thinking is, first, I was just using it on children. And I would have autistic nonverbal children be able to start to speak because it helps people to move through trauma. And so then I was using it with behavioral and et cetera, right? So I was sending these children with these newly retuned nervous systems back into the family home that was still in its same state. And it's like I tell parents, no matter what our faces are saying and how much prosody and musicality is in our voice, if our nervous system sounds like inside, they're recording that, they're ingesting that, right? So then I started saying, wait, what if I just worked with the parents first on this particular program? And then the parents were reporting back to me, wow, our child is now communicating differently with us. Wow, our child just climbed into bed with us and cuddled, and wow, my wife and my husband are not so annoying to me as they were last week. Like there's these, or the nervous systems are getting more
I'm
regulated.
feeling that. I'm feeling that from this side of being the annoying one.
And I'm glad you realized that, John. You're hard to work with sometimes. I'm just kidding. I'm just
Ouch,
fucking kidding.
ouch.
I know. I love you, John. I'm just kidding. All right. Anyway, sorry, Peachy.
No, but that's just it. It's like we get into these habits, right? And we're sort of white knuckling it in all of our relationships when our nervous system is not regulated and comfortable. And we're just sort of like bootstrapping ourselves to pick ourselves up and engage. So, much of what you guys talk about is, mindfulness is working to regulate the autonomic nervous system so we can more comfortably be in our brain and body and engage, which as social beings is what we are, right?
we've had a couple of guests on in the past that talked about the internal family system, right? And it's incredible. And we actually just had Seth Copald on a couple weeks ago. And I asked the question, I was like, what does this actually look like in practice? And then he was like, well, rather than me telling you, why don't I run you through it? And it was incredible. So I'm going to ask you that same question for the family nervous system, that framework. What does that actually look like in practice? And how do you go about involving each family member in this process?
So the way that I like to say it is that, all families want to exist in a harmony state, right? Each individual wants to feel safe and comfortable enough in their own brain and body to connect with themselves, with each other, and with the world around them. So the number one thing to do is to recognize, because normally the attention's on one person, right? Dad has this, or this child has that, or whatever it is, and the focus is on them. And then siblings get ignored, and then the spouse sometimes feel more stressed or more disconnected, right? So it's really about allowing a family to have an engagement. When it's with me, and I'm training people to do this now. But when it's with me, for instance, it's okay. Here's why they came to me. Great, let's look at that, and that's important. And okay, how does this impact your life, right? And then I go like this with parents all the time. It happens the same way. And they're telling me all about their kids usually, and I say, and how's your sleep? And how's your bowel movements? And how's your stress level? And they go, oh my God, I haven't done that. And the last time I had blood tests, it said I had this and this and this and this, right? Because parents will do for their children what they will not do for themselves.
Amen. Amen to that.
I'm an access point for parents to understand, all this that's going on with me, I can't just say, wait for me until they're better. It doesn't work that way. And then it allows them to give themselves permission to start the journey for their own health and wellness.
Yeah. And if we're not, as parents, if we're not taking care of ourselves, then we can't show up as the best, versions of ourselves for our kids. It's just like leaders, right? So many leaders in business, they don't take care of themselves because they're so busy taking care of their people, and that ultimately wears them out. Now you can hear my crazy kids yelling in the background. But yeah, I feel it. Will, over to you, my friend.
No, well, let's get into some of the challenges, that to bring this work into people's lives, and to actually even wake families up to this possibility. But let's talk about the relationship between, the parent and the child. Like, so what, so how do parental states directly impact like the child's well-being? If you want to give an example or tell a story, it might be a great way to do that.
Sure. And I'll focus just on some of the dad stories I have based on, because it's men speaking mindful.
Men talking mindful.
Yeah, men talking mindful. So, some of the challenges that I see that the dad patients that come to me have is, number one, they may not have been given the language, right, to communicate their state. They are taught to be strong and white knuckle it and don't worry about that pain. It's fine, right? And then they often, if they're engaged in the workforce and they have pressures there, they're trying to survive and provide. And so when that is a state, like we would put that into a fight flight. If we had to classify it just in the three basic states, that's living in a fight flight state. And does that give them an opportunity to have curiosity and time for engagement and time for genuine interaction when their off time is spent in recovery? It's kind of like, you work, right? And then you have the pressures of what you have to do at home. And then where is that nourishment from the family, that like allowing it to come in for them so that they can then have more resilience in their nervous system so that the rest of the stuff they have to deal with isn't impacting them as much. And I'll frame it this way. So the autonomic nervous system, we say that the state that you're in, whether it's shut down, fight, flight, where most people live, or open and engaged, is going to actually determine your reaction to the stressors the internal milieu from food, from toxins, the outside sounds, lights, etc., the external people. So your state is actually determining your response. But then your response to those things in real time is creating inflammation and more stress. So then it's not allowing you to shift into a safer state. So, for recognizing that if we all want to have a good relationship, an engaged, a nourishing, a heart-fulfilled relationship with our children, family, spouses, everyone, it's about identifying, hey, what is my body's wisdom? What, right? And that does sound hoo-hooey, I get it. But what is my body? How about this? I'll keep it scientific. What is my body's interoception? The cues from my organ, okay? What are the cues from my systems telling me? If I feel something, that is already symptomatic. A symptom comes at the top of dysfunction. So how do I find a little more awareness around what I'm eating, my sleep hygiene, my morning routine? What can I do to reduce my stressors, internal, external, just by 5% here and there? Because if we can get that infinity sign, right? If our state's in this fight, flight, and then it comes down, but we can reduce some of those extra stressors, and then we have some engagement and that fills us up a little bit. This is legitimately how our nervous system heals. And then we can then start to shift more consistently and build resilience so we don't have such significant impacts.
Yeah, I love that you use that word. I was listening to an earlier podcast that you did, and interoception, right? And tell me if the breakdown of this word is correct, or the way it means something to me. Like in inner, right? Terra is the Latin word for earth, right? Which can also be grounding, right? We're kind of grounding into our intuition. Perception perception, how we're synthesizing, the physical experience with obviously the mental experience and emotional experience. And I heard that, I was like, that is a fucking genius term, right? To really help us to get into you talk about the gut, we hear gut instincts, follow your gut, right? And it's like, think of that interoception, internal grounding and listening to that grounding within, and then working from that grounded place. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but it made it, I was like, I thought, holy shit. The word terror is one of my favorite words because it
I
means
was
earth.
going to say,
It
man,
does.
you're kind of like nerding out on what is the entomology? No, that's not right.
Entomology.
Yeah.
Entomology.
Entomology. Into something.
It makes a difference.
This is like you in the biology just a couple weeks ago,
yeah,
man.
exactly.
Your inner nerd is coming out again.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well,
Sorry, BG.
No, it's great. So I will say to you, John, that I think you might have just made a new word. So interoception, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Whereas what I was saying was interoception.
Oh,
So
okay.
I
Oops.
love what you just said, and I may have to okay.
I think we just coined it.
Yeah.
Or will.
Right here on Men Talking Mindfulness.
Figure it out, okay? Let's find out. So, because interoception is really the signals that come from our organs, okay, and communicate to us, right? So we get liver signals all the time. We get pancreas, spleen, and plus, let's make this a bio lesson. Our enteric nervous system. If no one knows what that is, I want to explain just for a second. Because if you want to talk about our gut feelings or our intuition, and men are not often given credit for their intuition, which is profoundly strong and just ridiculous. We all have the same enteric nervous systems, right? So the enteric nervous system is embedded in the gut lining, and it communicates in real time to our autonomic nervous system. So now imagine you have these super receptors in your gut, and you're putting food in there that is completely inflaming it and pissing it off. And then that's feedbacking into the nervous system. And those 80% of our signals in our brain go up from our gut, 20% come down. So then it kicks off this feedback loop. Like, for instance, in TBIs, the injury happens up here, but within 24 to 48 hours, there's gut involvement. And now that gut involvement is now sending continued inflammatory signals back up. And so now it's a systemic autonomic nervous system issue. So I think the key is really understanding that, like the old, the hip bone's connected to the thigh bone. We cannot tease our parts apart. except for in IFS, internal family systems, like
Right. That's a different type of part.
big parts, but I love those parts. But, let's start to respect our own physiology and understand, we're not, oh, my stomach, my gut, my arm, all of our information that we digest from the world, whether it comes into our senses, our vestibular system, our enteric nervous system, it is all creating our expressions, how we experience the world internally and how we behave externally.
We started talking about, you noticed some of the children, after the adults had kind of confided in you after a while, they were like, yeah, everything's fine, but this kid has anxiety, this kid has depression, this kid has gut problems. And I know in our questionnaire that we sent to you before the show, you mentioned that 50% or so of children in the U.S. have at least one chronic mental or physical diagnosis. What are some of the factors driving this increase? And I guess, is it an increase? From what I've read, it is an increase. But what are some of the factors that are driving this increase in childhood mental and physical diagnoses?
I'm going to cite the research so that this is not an opinion-based answer. Harvard, Yale, Stanford have all been doing studies in the past 2 years, okay? What they have found, I'm going to just name a couple, is that ultra-processed foods create significant neurological, emotional, and behavioral changes in children and adults. Ultra-processed foods are up to 70% of a child's diet. Ultra-processed foods change the microbiome expression completely, which, as we just figured out, impacts the autonomic nervous system. So food is a significant contributor. It's only just starting to be discussed, but it's where I started only working with people 30 years ago. So I worked with chronic illness 30 years ago, from brain tumors, spinal tumors, neurological dysfunctions. Back then we were already doing no gluten, no dairy, no sugar, increase fermented foods, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, lots of fibrous vegetables. Now, all of that has shifted and changed. Today it's, let's discuss keto, let's discuss quality of fats, all of those things. But for children specifically, yes, it's increasing because their diet has changed, right? And in our country, unfortunately, many of the food products, it went from big tobacco to big food. That is a well-researched jump, okay? Big food hired all of the same psychologists and marketing teams that were marketing tobacco and said, hey, how do we make this more interesting to children? So, that is just, it's just the reality. So that research is out there. You can find it all very easy on PubMed or Google around. So how do we stop this increase? Parents get super stressed when I say, okay, that behavior might actually just be a sensitivity to this one food. And I do blood tests and I look at neurological antibodies and I get stool test review, that I don't have to look at the poop anymore, but I just look at the results. But it all shows a really direct causative relationship. Inflammation in our gut. And I would venture to say that 8 out of 10 of your listeners, if they were honest about like how they feel, either have stomach pain, gut pain, loose stools, constipation, bloating after eating, burping, whatever it is. That is saying that the gut itself is having some type of dysfunction, breaking down the food. Then it's creating different bacteria, which is now going to change the signals that go to our brain. If you take these young brains, right, where the moms were exposed to ultra-processed foods, lots of chemicals, poor sleep habits, tons of screen time, which dysregulates our melatonin, and what are we not doing when we're on screens, right? And that goes to the children too. We're not engaging, we're not running around and getting exercise. Children are exercise. What's it called? Gym has been canceled.
I know we forget the name. We forget the fucking name. Something that was so deeply
PE.
in our childhood. Go to PE. Go to gym class. Who wants to go? Now it's like, what did they do that? What is that thing that we did in the 70s, 80s, and 90s?
My kids still go to gym. Thankfully.
I know. I'm sorry.
Colorado, right? But in the rest of the world over here, my kids told me we're not allowed to run on the playground anymore because of someone might get hurt. That's insane because neurological development, and this is super key for parents, neurological development actually happens in movement. It's not
Wow.
hammering in facts on top. Okay.
Mhm.
Pathways in the brain are created as we cross over our midline, crawling, etc.
Can we talk a little bit more about inflammation? And you talked about the cause being a lot of these processed foods, and I know there's more definitely more conversation about the food dyes that are causing more inflammation. Plus, even you kind of mentioned like tapping into that circadian rhythm, which could gets us out of our natural biological processes. But like inflammation, does it affect um, children differently than adults? And or is it just kind of or is there universal inflammation also markers that just the human body has to put up with if you're introducing those foods into your diet?
So, what a great question. And I finally figured out a way to explain it, I think, is this. So, Will, if you felt super uncomfortable, like you had a headache and your body was aching and you just knew that something was off, right? You have the executive function and frontal lobe development to say, okay, don't go running from the screen right now. I'm going to have to sit this out. I'm going to wait till the podcast is over. And then I'll go for that, right?
Right.
Whereas children do not have that developed function yet. So what goes in comes right back out. So in other words, if they're having inflammation, they're not going to be like, and really I have to talk kids through it sometimes. Like they say, my stomach hurts. Well, where's your stomach? And they're pointing to their gut, but they're calling it their stomach, right? So kids, if they are inflamed and it's going right to the brain because that's how it works. And I can show you on neuroantibodies if you want to hang out afterwards. And so they just react. Those are the kids that are having these meltdowns, throwing, sometimes banging their heads. ADHD is part of inflammation. Even though Gabor Mate will talk about how it is a trauma-based, sure, we can take it back to trauma, the trauma of separation from parents, the non-engagement, all of those things, right? But then that lowered our resilience. And then anything going in was now creating more inflammation. So I'll just keep it, I always bring it back to the Infinity Song. So children will react more to these things because they cannot inhibit their control as well. So I would say that it's not just that it does kind of universally affect us, but also the younger generations are, and I've been saying this before I really understood what it meant. Like 30 years ago, I remember eating a head of broccoli. I was up in New Jersey on Long Beach Island, and I ate the broccoli and I was like, you know what, this actually tastes a little bit different than it did 10 years ago. And then I started learning about how the soil's nutrition is depleted. So now we're eating something that looks like a broccoli, but the amount of nutrition in it has nothing to do with what it was 40 years ago. So kids generationally and what the moms are eating, what the dads are eating, which matters just as much. For sperm quality, it's the same as a mom's eggs quality. It does matter. So then each of those are now generations of being exposed to new petrochemicals, new chemicals in the world, flame retardants on mattresses that people are breathing all the time. And all of these things, they add up. They erode our ability to stay comfortable.
I imagine even we're talking about the family unit and all this, even the vibration of expression. I would imagine, if we're going through having like a chronic inflammation, kind of a bout, or we're always in this chronic inflammation, the way that we're communicating, the way that we're being felt, how much energy is moving through our heart or something like that, I'd imagine is also diminished in some way or distorted. And it's just not really being more of that loving, kind, amazing, authentic person that we can be.
I love it. And it's so true, right? Heart rate variability, if you want to keep it technical, right? Rate variability, it's either, it is one of the most explicit indicators of long-term health and ability to live our lives into aged years. So if that is diminished and we're not in this coherent state between the brain, heart, body, then how do we engage with each other?
You mentioned making the food appealing to kids. I had to smile and also at the same time cry inside because I've got some chicken nuggets in my freezer that I'm sure are highly processed. But that's, like you said, processed foods are a large majority of children's today, their diet. And these chicken nuggets are shaped like dinosaurs. So of course our kids want to eat those dino nuggets. And I'm sure if I really unpacked it, they're terrible for the kids. And sadly, I'm actually, I just texted my wife off to the side. I was like, oh man, this lady that we're interviewing is spouting some seriously profound shit about kids and families and diet. Because our kids are always saying, my tummy hurts. And now I'm starting to have some serious parent guilt there. Like what do you do with parents who are, when they come in and they find out everything that they've been potentially doing to their kids? What do you do for the parents and the guilt that they feel?
Right. So of course it's unintentional, right? And we all love our kids and want them to feel well. And if you don't know what a food sensitivity looks like, then once you learn what it looks like, right? Parents get stressed about, I could not possibly go gluten or dairy free, which PS, if either you or your wife have any type of food sensitivity, your kids likely have it plus a few other ones, any kind of dysfunction, whatever. That's standard for you don't get apples from orange trees, right? So, uh, the thing is, like, we look at what those sensitivities are, and parents will say, "Oh my God, I can never do that." And I'll ask them, "Well, what's harder, watching your child suffer and likely have behavioral or learning and other things, or potentially like just restocking the pantry and shifting things?" And because parents often have those same challenges, but they don't know, because here's like just a mind blowing piece of information for me. Gluten, right? People will get celiac tested and it's negative. 95% of the people who come to me will be negative for celiac, positive for gluten sensitivity. Many people don't have gut pain from gluten. They have neurological and behavioral changes. Parts of our brain are often, this is like top level, I get it, but like are cross-reactive to the gluten molecule, which means that our cerebellums, which is where we get our balance and where our brainstem is, the synapsin and the sheath along our myelin in our brain for how our brain scaffolds, our pathways, are all cross-reactive to the molecule of gluten, which means that a lot of children and adults are having neurological, emotional, behavioral issues because of what they're eating, and no one is identifying this. And people in the neurofunctional world are. But so families are suffering unnecessarily. And sometimes when we just change the diet and get them a little bit more exercise, parents will say, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I've never seen this child before. I didn't know that this was my kid underneath." And what it was a ton of inflammation, pissing their brain off, and they were just reacting to it.
It's sad. It really is. It really is sad. And I'm glad you mentioned that part about when you tell parents this, then there's no way I can go gluten free. There's no way I can go processed food free. And because that's exactly what was running through my mind. My wife and I are both working professionals. We've got 3 young kids. Sometimes it's very easy just to get some mac and cheese and chicken nuggets, right? And I'm sure other parents out there can feel what I'm talking about. Because also the other side of that is kids. They have a very specific palate, right? And if you go from giving them chicken nuggets and mac and cheese to suddenly giving them, we do broccoli, but if we're giving them fewer and fewer processed foods and more organic, high fiber vegetables, they're probably gonna riot for a little while, right?
In the house.
So anyway, I'm glad that you said that piece, in that, hey, which heart are you choosing? Are you choosing the heart of preparing better meals, or are you choosing the heart of dealing with kids who are hurting, and that hurt is driving some behaviors that you definitely don't want to see? So anyway, I just wanted to thank you for that. So Will, over to you, friend.
Yeah, thank you for. I love. It's great. We're talking about the heart, guys. So nice, and even what you're like, we can be 2 hearts. What do you want to do? And sometimes it's the, it might seem the harder road in the beginning, but overall, it's going to create and eliminate a lot of problems, like choosing the healthier heart model, I guess you could say.
Well,
So why don't you Yeah,
Right.
please,
I would say we're
please, BG.
the other thing, John, is that, using that 5% rule that I teach about is,
Yeah, talk about that. Dive in there, please.
where is the low hanging fruit here? Okay, so let's say that two things. Number one, those are not just behavioral issues. When there's inflammation in the gut, that stays with them for life. Those are likely, it's building, right? So how long can they have that inflammation that's already exhibiting pain without another issue coming up, right? So these are signs that say something is off, and, we need to identify what it is so that children can learn how to drive this vehicle that they're going to be doing through their life, right? So when I talk to kids, it's kind of like, look, this is your car. What is the fuel that your body needs in order to optimize your efficiency? And, some kids will be like, I'll say like, that feeling you get when you get crazy brain after you eat something like this? They're like, yeah. So doesn't that make it hard to study or to like do what you want to do? Yeah. And then my stomach hurts. So, they are much more open to this information than the adults, because adults get this freeze response because they likely know that they're eating stuff that's hurting them too. And so it's very threatening for us to think about, because as humans, we only change when the pain points are hard enough. I am exactly the same. I am not the food police, right? It's like when something hurts me enough, I'm going to figure out what I'm doing that's not working well. And so, 5%, how can people use this in a tangible way?
And what is the 5%? What is that rule? Like, you just want to give us a little baseline, what that stands for.
So 5% rule is, where can we eliminate some of the inputs, whether it's around us, whether if our children or us get really bonkers after too much video game time. Like a lot of parents notice that, right? Okay, maybe we reduce that. Let's reduce that by 5%. Maybe we reduce the amount of ultra processed food by 5%. Maybe we increase with a little fiber powder, right, which is going to nourish the gut, help to heal the gut, right? Put that into some applesauce and give it to them, like depending upon the age. But also give them information. Just because this is new information for us as adults, we can still pass it on to them and let them understand, hey, here's how the body works. So this is why we're going to start to do these things. And you know how that doesn't feel good, or this? Here's why, here's how. Planting those seeds for them will give them the opportunity to make those changes and decisions when they're a little bit older too, with the knowledge that it was already there. So then, hey, let's do a little bit more fiber. What new vegetable, kiddo? Do you want to, let's go to the vegetable aisle, pick one a week. Let's figure it out. Hey, the other thing kids love is taking care of their family. So if you say, hey, mom and dad need to start eating a little bit differently, because we want to make sure we feel good. We all want to live a long time and all those things. We're trying to implement this in. What do you think we should do? We're supposed to pick out 2 or 3 vegetables, or we're supposed to pick out a couple fruits, eat a rainbow, play that game with them. Uh, Kids really want to feel like they're contributing to the family's wellness, and getting that information for themselves. So that's the 5% decrease. And then also, just where can we build in 5% of outside time, in nature, in sun, early morning, 5 minutes in the sun or sky, even looking out of a window with the window open resets our melatonin, our circadian rhythm. So all of those things, 5% here, 5% there, starts to reset, allow our nervous system to move into more safety, become less reactive to those things. Seed oils and red dye are never going to be comfortable, or never going to be healthy, but can we limit our reaction to them? Yes.
Well, what does that look like over time? Like, if I really, have a family, want to make like a real behavior change, implementing this 5% rule, like, is it like a few months over, just doing these little small changes, getting the kids involved, creating a different conversation, that you can actually, push away, maybe eliminate 90 to 100% of all the stuff that's causing this inflammation?
So I'd say it's really different for every family. Some families start to notice the shift right away because the parents shift when they start having these conversations. They feel less threatened by the information when they see the child start to engage in that conversation. So it becomes less of a heavy lift for them. And then, okay, well, I'm going to start to do this. Okay, well, now I'm doing, there's something called the microbiome mashup. Everyone can look it up. It's free. It's basically 25, 30 vegetables into a food processor once a month, freeze it, break off a little piece, eat it. can completely shut your entire family because the gut only needs these fibers to feed butyrate, which creates neurochemicals, etc. So these like that are a really easy lift for many people, and the kids love picking them out, throwing them in the food processor. So for some families, literally just eliminating one or two of the most inflammatory foods can create so much shift for the parents and the children that then everything is already a much lighter lift.
Mm. So what was that? The microbiome mashup? All right, I'm looking that up immediately after this.
Yeah, so you can get your kids to press the buttons, John. Like let's
right. Oh my
fire up
gosh,
the
they love that
blender.
stuff.
Yeah,
that's right.
Let's freeze it. Let's get it out of the freezer. Family health.
They'll think it's a popsicle. What about probiotics? Just throwing that in as far as a supplement.
Mm-hmm.
Are those helpful?
So I stopped using them about 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, really?
I did, except for specific cases, right? Because I want you to imagine the microbiome has an umpteen amount of different indicators, we'll call them, right? Lactobacillus, bacillus, all of these different milieu, and each person's is as different as a thumbprint. So if you put in 10 strains, high dose of one thing that maybe you don't need, well, too much of anything is going to throw our system off. So that's where the microbiome mashup actually comes in really handy, because that actually feeds your own microbiome the way it wants to uptake it, and then creates its own bacteria the way it needs to. So prebiotics are often super problematic for people because they'll eat them and they'll get bloated, which creates an inflammation. So if someone was going to do nothing else and they had like constant constipation or diarrhea, like sure, playing around with prebiotics can be helpful, definitely. There's someone, his name is Dr. Nemechek, for kids with autism. He's done a lot of research also with the autonomic nervous system. And he only works with basically SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and how to minimize that because it has such an entirely huge impact on the brain. I mean, he's worked with, I've used it for years, just a little bit of inulin, and many of the autistic nonverbal children start to speak. And let me just say, the intention of working with autistic children is not to get them to speak. That is not a higher quality. I'm not saying that is like the goal, but the goal is to give each child the opportunity to reach their potential. And so, if reducing inflammation then brings on speech or new behaviors that are able to allow the child to engage in a more full way, that is what we do with when working with autistic children.
Wow, that's contrary to everything I've ever heard. So I appreciate that, because I've been taking prebiotics and probiotics, I don't know, for years.
And they might work for you, and that's great.
Yeah.
And many people it works really well for, but when you've seen some of the really significant implications of doing the wrong one for certain people, I just have a practice of do no harm, in the sense that like I work with really low interventions so that the body's resilience, and I know that we're probably wrapping up soon, so I'll leave it with like, our cells are designed to heal, right? To rebalance themselves and reach homeostasis. That's what their entire function. So giving them as little information from the outside, and information is supplements and probiotics and light therapy and all these different things. How do we rebalance and find our homeostasis with our own internal wisdom without as much from the outside, and then see what we need? So that's why I just try and limit what I put in.
What was the light therapy that you just mentioned?
Oh, red light therapy?
Red light therapy. At first, I thought you said Bud Light therapy. I'm like, I'm quite sure that's not what she said.
Yeah, definitely. That's fucking therapy in Pennsylvania. Bud Light therapy for my people. Sorry, I love you guys. So let's so I'm so glad we talked a lot about the body, and I think one thing that can really help us and close with this a little bit, maybe there's anything else we need to add. But I love we talked about the body and inflammation and red light and stuff like that from more of a mental perspective, and the practices of mindfulness like meditation and breathing. Like, is this something that can help us, get more in touch with ourselves and the family, and really incorporate more health into our lives and the lives of our loved ones.
Right. So absolutely. And here's from my perspective why. Um, is it easier to sit and have a mindful moment, in nature or on the mat or in our walks, whatever it is, when we are feeling stressed, inflamed, and really amped up? Or is it easier when we have a little bit more regulation where we're not feeling so threatened from our own internal cues, our own thoughts, our own anxiety and stress levels? So really the goal here, Dr. C. Porges helped me understand that my work is actually about creating safety, and safety so that our nervous systems can then engage in mindfulness, can then engage in loving practices with each other and connection to the world. Because if we can reduce the sense of, I am not okay, right? This dissociative, let me scroll for 2 hours, let me binge watch, let me do whatever unhealthy behavior, let me drink a bottle of wine, because I don't feel safe enough to just sit and be with this. So that is a form of dissociation. And those mindful moments, in order to access them, of course, it's much easier when we're feeling a little bit better within our own skin.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt that too. It makes complete sense. So for our listeners, first off, BG, this has been fantastic. My mind is just blown by everything that you've covered, and there's some things that I'm going to go throw out of my pantry right now. That said, if our listeners wanted to get a hold of you to find out more, or if they wanted to start working with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
So I'm on Instagram at Brain Gut Institute, and LinkedIn, BG Mancini. I put a lot of really what I consider important content up there to help families and parents and professionals understand. And my website, it's braingutinstitute.com. And I'll tell you, a lot of people who call these days, I'm really sort of saying to them, they call and they tell me, and I say, hey, why don't you just start with step one? Try that and then give me a call back. And then as they start to put those foundational things in, if they need to dive a little deeper, because I want to be respectful of people's time and money. And so I don't want people to dive into $1,000 worth of testing or $300 worth of testing. I'm like, hey, why don't you try changing this little thing and then see if it helps? And then it's like, oh yeah, you know what? It did. Okay, what's the next step? So, it's always, and we can always come back and do this again if you have more targeted focuses. But, thank you for, bringing that to, this to your audience. I really love.
Thank you, BG. And I just realized BG, brain gut also.
Yeah.
I'm a little
brain
slow.
gut baby girl.
John, but my regional logo was Gut and Brain Institute. My friends were like, are you crazy? Like, did that being a brain shot?
Wow.
All right.
Good catch,
BG,
John.
this has been awesome. We'll wrap it up with one quick breath as an exercise, and then we'll be done. So we, again, are respectful of your time. So if you would join me, let's go ahead and just like Will did at the beginning, let's just start with a nice big exhale, emptying, grounding, but holding empty at the bottom, and then a nice long, slow breath in, filling up all the way to the top. Feeling that fullness, and then releasing. All right. BG, thank you so much again. It's been awesome. Like I said, my mind is blown. Will, I'll turn it over to you to wrap it up, my friend.
Just more appreciation, more thanks. And really for making this something that is very easy to consume, very easy to hear, and very easy to action. And that's all you need to do. That 5%, just one little thing. We talk about little changes, baby steps all the time. And what can you eliminate, or what can you bring in? That's going to bring more health to you. So definitely check out what braingutinstitute.com, right?
Mm-hmm.
For more of this information. And BG, thank you for joining us today and putting all this wonderful information together so you can bring it into the world and change the lives of people. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. It was such a pleasure. It was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and for our listeners, thank you for joining us. Until next time, take care. Peace.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.